President Trump posted a video depicting the Obamas as apes, sparking outrage from both the left and the right. The now deleted video was about unsubstantiated voting fraud claims from 2020. In the last few seconds, the video flashes to a scene with former President Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama's heads superimposed on monkeys' bodies, with a song from The Lion King playing.
The most racist thing I've seen out of this White House. Those are the words of Tim Scott, the lone black Republican in the U.S. Senate, in response to a social media post by President Trump. The post was a video that included former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama depicted as apes. An uproar ensued, including from Senator Scott and other Republicans, after initially calling the response fake outrage, the White House changing its tune. A senior White House official now tells the Hill's cable news partner News Nation, quote, "A White House staffer erroneously made the post. It has been taken down," end quote.
I think this was a situation that had caused such outrage that the White House had very little real option other than to take this post down. The reason for that outrage, I think, is very obvious to anybody. The depiction of black people as apes or monkeys is one of, if not the most notorious and long-running and horrendous racist tropes. So for a video to include such a clip and be disseminated, reposted by the President of the United States, obviously caused enormous outrage, as was reflected in that quote that you read from Senator Scott. So I think it was, I mean, the video speaks for itself, and the decision to take it down, I think, also speaks for itself.
Senator Scott's comments were particularly stark. He said, here's the full quote, "Praying it was fake because it's the most racist thing I've seen out of this White House. The president should remove it." Couple of things on that. I don't know what he thought could have been fake about it. Obviously, the pictures are fake, but the post wasn't fake. And also, he seemed to be suggesting there that the White House has done other racist things.
Yeah, I mean, it was a somewhat oddly phrased response there. The most racist thing I've seen, suggesting there were perhaps other racist but not so egregiously racist things. And the suggestion of a fake, like you, I was confused by that. I mean, the image itself obviously is a confected image, but perhaps he was opening the door for the kind of rationale or explanation that the White House later gave, the idea that it was put up by a staffer. But like the word fake there was confusing. I mean, it's obviously a video that was shared under the account of the President of the United States, and people can make their own mind up about how credible they consider the explanation that it was really a staffer to be.
For years, American businesses have risked running out of critical minerals during market disruptions. Today, we're launching what will be known as Project Vault to ensure that American businesses and workers are never harmed by any shortage. We even expect the American taxpayer to make a profit from the interest on the loan used to start the Project Vault.
President Trump says he will move to close Washington's Kennedy Center for 2 years, starting in July for construction. Trump's announcement follows a wave of cancellations by artists since he ousted the previous leadership and added his name to the building. The president announced his plan days after the premiere of Melania, a documentary of the First Lady, was shown at the storied venue. Trump says the proposal is subject to approval by the board of the Kennedy Center, which has been stocked with his hand-picked allies.
You announced you wanted to build a new and spectacular entertainment complex at the Kennedy Center.
Right.
Do you plan on tearing it down, and how much will all of the renovations cost?
Probably around $200 million. And, you know, it's funny, in real estate and building, I've done so much of it. I've done so well with it. You want to sit with something for a little while before you decide on what you want to do. And, you know, we sat with it. We ran it. It's in very bad shape. It's run down. It's dilapidated. It's sort of dangerous. Things fall out of ceilings. You've seen it. You can't do any work because people are coming in and out, and you have the workmen. I was thinking maybe there's a way of doing it simultaneously, but there really isn't. And we're going to have something that when it opens, it's going to be brand new, beautiful. I'm not ripping it down. I'll be using the steel. So we're using the structure. We're using some of the marble, and some of the marble comes down.
President Trump is calling for Republican lawmakers to nationalize voting in several states.
These people were brought to our country to vote, and they vote illegally. And amazing that the Republicans aren't tougher on it. The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. And we have states that are so crooked, and they're counting votes. We have states that I won that show I didn't win.
Let's start with 2020. Widespread voter fraud there. What happened in 2020?
Well, I mean, if you look at the officials from President Trump's own administration at the time, Attorney General Bill Barr, other top law enforcement officials looked into this and told the president at the time that his claims about widespread election fraud were false. Of course, President Trump never really let go of that.
All this is happening as Republicans, as we mentioned, are trying to add on the SAVE Act to this DHS funding bill. The SAVE Act requires a proof of citizenship and residence when registering, photo ID to vote, voter roll purges every 30 days, and blocks universal mail-in voting. This is all red meat to a lot of Republicans.
What the president was referring to is the SAVE Act, which is a huge common sense piece of legislation that Republicans have supported, that President Trump is committed to signing into law during his term. And he spoke with the speaker directly about that yesterday, about the need to get that bill on the floor for a vote, because it provides very common sense measures for voting in our country, such as voter ID. I don't think any rational person who's being honest with themselves would disagree with the idea of requiring citizens of this country to present an ID before casting a ballot in a federal election, or frankly in any election. And that's something the president wants to see happen. So that's what he was referring to.
But to be clear, he does believe the state should oversee all.
The president believes in the United States Constitution. However, he believes there has obviously been a lot of fraud and irregularities that have taken place in American elections. And again, voter ID is a highly popular and common sense policy that the president wants to pursue, and he wants to pass legislation to make that happen for all states across the country.
And Kelly, just to follow up on that, he said specifically that they should take over elections in 15 states. Can you tell us what he meant by that, what 15 states he's referring to in terms of Republicans taking over elections?
Again, what I was just telling you is that with the passage of the SAVE Act, voter ID will be implemented across all 50 states. The president was referring to specific states in which we have seen a high degree of fraud. If you look at states like California, or if you look at New York City, for example, non-citizens are allowed to vote in elections in places like California and New York City. That just creates a system, an electoral system, that is absolutely ripe with fraud. And you cannot deny the fact that, unfortunately, there are millions of people who have questions about that, as does the president. He wants to make it right, and the SAVE Act is a solution to doing it.
What exactly did you mean when you said that you should nationalize elections, and which 15 states are you talking about?
I want to see elections be honest, and if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it. Because, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway. But when you see some of these states about how horribly they run their elections, what a disgrace it is, I think the federal government, when you see crooked elections, and we had plenty of them, and by the way, we had them last time, but go to 2020 and look at the facts that are coming out. Rigged, crooked elections. If we have areas, take a look at Detroit, take a look at Pennsylvania, take a look at Philadelphia. You go take a look at Atlanta. Look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections. And the federal government should not allow that. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
But the Constitution says it should be states that administer elections, Mr. President. That's what the Constitution says.
They can administer the election, but they have to do it honestly. I'm thrilled to sign the Consolidated Appropriations Act to immediately reopen the federal government and fund the vast majority of operations through the rest of the fiscal year. The bill officially ends all taxpayer subsidies for radical far-left woke programming on NPR and PBS, or just a waste of money. It slashes nearly $10 billion in wasteful foreign aid spending, giving money to countries that don't need it. It continues the closure of USAID and creates a brand new America First Opportunity Fund for responsibly providing foreign assistance to nations where it actually serves American interests. This bill also cuts funding to abusive and weaponized IRS programs. I was a victim of that were used to harass American taxpayers. It builds on the Republican rescissions package passed last summer. It fully funds our military, includes a well-deserved pay raise for all American service members, and makes historic investments in the American shipbuilding industry. It continues to fund deportation flights that are removing dangerous illegal aliens from our country. It continues historically successful efforts to reduce crime in our nation's capital. And it continues funding for the Department of Homeland Security until later in the year. And finally, I am extremely pleased to announce that this bill includes a newly designated, movie star, Melania Trump Foster Youth to Independence Initiative within the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which will support America's foster youth and provide them critical resources as they age out of the foster care system.
A few months ago, you had in your office here Peter Mandelson, the British ambassador. You were shaking hands with him over a trade deal. He's today been forced to resign from the House of Lords, the upper house of the British Parliament, over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Just wondered if you had any reaction to that, since obviously he was...
I didn't know about it, but I really don't know too much about it. I know who he is. It's too bad. Speaking of Epstein, I will say this. A reporter named Wolf and Epstein conspired. This just came out yesterday in the millions of pages of documents, how crazy this is. Conspired against me in order to fight like hell to make sure I lose the election. That's the only thing that was mentioned about me. Yeah, what do you want?
On the Epstein files, you talked about Democrats who were in there. Elon Musk was also in there, and so was your Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and correspondence that he had with him. Did you read those new files that were published by the Department of Justice?
I have a lot of things I'm doing, a lot of things I'm doing. I don't know. You mentioned two names. I'm sure they're fine. Otherwise, it would have been major headlines.
A lot of women who are survivors of Epstein's are unhappy with those redactions that came out. Some of them, entire witness interviews are totally blacked out. Do you think that they should be more transparent?
The fact that they thought they released too much. I heard that, and you tell me something else. I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else. Now that nothing came out about me, other than there was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
But what would you say to people who feel like they haven't gotten justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about. Yeah, what did you say?
What would you say to the survivors who feel like they haven't gotten justice?
You are the worst reporter. No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. She's a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen a smile on your face.
I'm asking you about survivors.
You know why you're not smiling? Because you know you're not telling the truth. And you're a very dishonest organization, and they should be ashamed of you.
These are survivors of sexual abuse.
President Trump is threatening to sue Grammys host Trevor Noah over a joke he made last night about President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Noah joked that Trump wants Greenland because he needs a new island now that he can't hang out with former President Bill Clinton on Epstein's island anymore. Trump slammed Noah, saying he has never been to Epstein's island before. Trump called Noah's joke false and defamatory. Trump said, "I have never been accused of being there, not even by the fake news media." Trump called Noah a total loser and said he's sending his lawyers to sue this poor, pathetic, talentless dope. Now, keep in mind that while Trump's name has been mentioned more than 3,000 times in files tied to Epstein, he has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing in connection to him.
On the Hill, there's a growing concern among Republicans that President Trump's handling of the economy and immigration could cost the party the midterms. House Republicans have been sharing these feelings behind closed doors. Well, now Senate GOPers are also sharing similar concerns.
Well, I think conventional wisdom is that the Republicans are set to likely lose the House of Representatives. And now there is growing concern among Republicans about what's going to happen in the Senate. In some ways, I look at this as geography versus environment. Republicans have a built-in advantage. They have a 3-seat lead right now. With the vice president, Democrats would have to pick up 4 seats in order to take over the majority. what Democrats see is an environment that is favorable to them. If you look at the president's popularity, if you look at people's views of the economy, they think the environment that they're going to be on could allow them to win in some states where they've had trouble over the last few election cycles.
So looking at the economy, we got some new polling from NPR and Marist, really flashing red lights for Republicans. 36% of Americans approve of how President Trump is handling the economy. 59% disapprove. That is the highest disapproval for President Trump ever over both terms. If I'm a Republican candidate, I'm looking at that and wondering, well, how does that affect me?
There is a pattern in midterm elections where the party that is out of power, the voters that associate with that party, so Democrats in this case, are a bit more energized, a bit more animated, and somewhat more likely to show up for a midterm election than the party that holds the White House, so Republicans in this case. And we see this over and over again. It's basically the notion of differential turnout. In a presidential election, obviously, like much of the electorate shows up, or at least the largest, part of the electorate that we see in any elections in the U.S. Well, in a midterm election, you don't see quite as high a turnout, and that turnout tends to be a little skewed toward the party that is out of the White House. People are just more motivated. And the other thing that is going on is that independent voters tend to sort of move against the president's party, especially if the president is not terribly popular, which Donald Trump's approval rating is in the low 40s. So that really adds up right now. And so at the moment, Democrats have a double-digit lead in the teens. It varies from day to day in our polling average, but it could be anywhere from like 12 to 17 percentage point lead among independents. And that, I think, is helping them have this large of a lead, and is a danger for Republicans moving forward if that lead holds or even grows.
And what you see here is a representation of the entirety of the House Democratic Caucus and the Senate Democratic Caucus, united in reining in an agency, ICE, that's out of control, and a Trump administration that is actually unleashing state-sponsored violence on the American people and on law-abiding immigrant families. That's completely and totally unacceptable. It's unconscionable, and it's un-American. And so Democrats are united in pushing back in the ways that have been articulated. Mike Johnson and John Thune aren't working for the American people. They work for Donald Trump. And so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they function like a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump cartel. So at the end of the day, listen, Trump understands that the public is not with the administration's cruel and chaotic policies here, and that we actually need to restore law and order as it relates to how we proceed. And we're ready to proceed in good faith. To sit down. Are those red lines for you? Mike Johnson has articulated unreasonable positions. He's actually supporting the notion that mass and lawless ICE agents should be deployed in communities throughout America. That's Mike Johnson's position. That's contrary to what the American people believe should be taking place. Mike Johnson called the Fourth Amendment an inconvenience. It's not an inconvenience. It's part of the fabric and DNA of our country.
President Trump's decision to scale back aggressive immigration enforcement in the wake of protests on the ground and uproar from Democrats in Congress is leading to pushback from the MAGA base. Advocates of hardline immigration tactics are urging the president to push forward with his sweeping deportation agenda.
We're hearing this mostly from a lot of the more MAGA commentators like Steve Bannon, Megyn Kelly, Jack Posobiec, those types that have long been in the MAGA sphere. And they're basically saying, especially when this first happened and the second federal immigration agents involved shooting of Alex Preddy happened, they were saying, let's not give in to these demands to lessen immigration enforcement. I think a large portion of elected Republicans in Congress that I've heard from are pretty happy with the changes that Trump is making. They're open to reforms, some reforms, but then you have other conservatives and more MAGA type of Republicans who are not going as far as to, directly criticize the Trump administration or Trump himself for how they're handling this. But they are saying, let's actually, go harder in some senses.
Then I get others Pretty much the same 9. I don't want to name too many, but I would. And they always get there. We have one that doesn't get there. We have one guy. He's an automatic no. No matter what. If we did welfare reform, if we did the greatest thing in history for religion, no matter what we did, no matter how good it is, greatest tax cuts, and we just did the greatest tax cuts in history, he voted against. He voted. Now, no matter what we do, this moron, no matter what it is, we could put them all together. I think, Mike, what would you say the top 5 things? Name them. We'll put them in one bill, and we'll put them before we'll get 100% vote, except for this guy named Thomas Massie. There's something wrong with him. We call him Rand Paul Jr. You know, it's like they just vote no. They love voting no. They think it's good politically. The guy's polling at about 9%. It's not good. But we have great support, and we have great support for religion. You know, I've done more for religion than any other president. When Paula was saying that, it was so nice. I was proud of it. And I said, that's true. I told the people backstage, what she said is true. Who else would say that, right? But it is true. But then I said, but that's not saying much, because not too many presidents have done too much for religion. I want to tell you that. Certainly modern day presidents, they bailed out on you. They bailed out.
Tonight at 7 p.m. during prime time, President Trump, Dr. Oz, and National Design Studio Director Joe Gebbia will officially unveil TrumpRx, a state-of-the-art website for American consumers to purchase low-cost prescription drugs. This historic announcement will save millions of Americans their hard-earned money.
This launch represents the largest reduction in prescription drug prices in history by many, many times. Nobody thought it was possible to get it done. It's the biggest thing to happen in healthcare, I think, in many, many decades.
This is TrumpRx.gov.
I think any effort to lower drug prices for Americans is a good thing. So we should just be positive and celebrate that. That's a good thing. It's going to be really, really helpful for people who don't have health insurance.